After the A-bombs were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and images like these emerged, the world got a glimpse of how devastating nuclear war is. And as the Cold War ramped up against the Soviet Union in the decades that followed World War II, the threat of nuclear warfare haunted American society, and average citizens prepared for what they believed to be the very real possibility for a nuclear strike.
Again.
I'm old enough to remember doing drills like this in first grade when my father was stationed at Marine Corps Station El Toro in Orange County, and I went to Irvine Elementary right out the front gate. The sound of air raid sirens were ever present, and that ominous sound was implanted in my brain at a very young age. Now, a couple times during the Cold War, we got close to a nuclear shooting war. Books like this one, 1 Minute to Midnight, deal with one particular situation. This is the Cuban Missile Crisis, where we got very close. I recommend this book highly. And no reasonable nation would want a nuclear war, which is why the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty was signed in the first place and re-upped every 5 years since that time. Here's a map that outlines the status of those involved in the Non-Proliferation Treaty. The lighter blue is the recognized nuclear weapons state ratifiers. Navy blue is recognized nuclear weapons state acceders. So that's basically China and France. Lighter green are the other ratifiers, meaning non-nuclear states who care about preventing nuclear proliferation. Darker green are other acceders or succeeders, Brazil, Saudi Arabia, some of the former Soviet states, Spain. Orange is withdrawn, North Korea. Red are non-signatories, Pakistan and India particularly. So the one yellow country is Taiwan, and making them an unrecognized state is the only way that China would come to the table. Here are the current nuclear warhead inventories. See, Russia leads the way, the United States is second, and China is fourth behind France, although a threat on the rise. Now note, these numbers are way down from the height of the Cold War, but because we're talking about any single one of these weapons is capable of great devastation, these are still significant numbers that merit great focus and attention. A couple years ago, the big threat was North Korea and Kim Jong-un's testing of nuclear capability. But what would it look like if Kim Jong-un actually acted on the threat? Well, let's imagine he wouldn't go after the United States as his opening salvo. He would go for a proxy like Japan. Here's what a North Korean strike on, for instance, Tokyo would look like. The North Koreans would most likely employ a Hwasong-15 missile out of the base at Chang'an. Here using the Nuke Map app, we select detonate. Now let's take a look at what the casualties would be. So you can see the estimated fatalities are just shy of 500,000, and then the injuries are 1.7 plus million. The radiation would cause an additional number of fatalities, 250,000, and another greater than 500,000 injuries associated with the radiation. And that cloud, and this is modeling using a 15-knot wind out of the southwest, you can see it extends a long way outside of Tokyo. Another, perhaps more classic nuclear war scenario is Russia attacking the continental United States, and most likely if they did that, they'd start with Washington, D.C. On the missile map here, we program in the launches out of Nizhny Tagil, which is an operational base in Russia, and they're using one of their MIRV ICBMs, the RS-28. So here we are, Washington, D.C. We'll select the Tsar Bomba, their biggest 100 megaton detonation. covers a very wide area, including my hometown. Calculating the estimated fatalities, over 2.5 million fatalities and almost 3 million injuries. And the radioactive cloud goes all the way across the Northeast into Canada. The color code here, the bright red's 1,000 rads, all the way down to the light yellow, which is 1 rad. Rads obviously talk about the amount of radiation. The other region that has been in the headlines lately, where the drums of potential nuclear war have been beating with greater volume, is the Western Pacific between Australia and China. Now, it made headlines a couple of weeks ago when the United States entered into a partnership with the Australians around building them nuclear submarines and cruise missile capability, which angered the French because that cut them out of a deal that they had with the Australians. And the reason the Australians are doing this is because they now perceive China as an existential threat to a greater degree than they have before, and they want some offensive capability as a result. So let's imagine how this might unfold. The first move is China is likely to take Taiwan, and then see what everybody's response is going to be at that point. Let's say China takes Taiwan, and as America starts to react with conventional forces, China winds up sinking one of our aircraft carriers using a hypersonic weapon that we were afraid they had been developing in recent years. As a result of those two moves, we decide to up the ante. And so we have an SSBN, one of our intercontinental ballistic missile submarines located in the waters of the South China Sea, launch a missile into, let's say, Beijing, for the most demoralizing effect on the population and to convince the Communist Party that they need to stop the aggression right now. So here we have our nuke map set for Beijing, using the Whiskey 76, which is the most common American sub-launched ballistic missile arsenal, 100 kilotons, about 0.2 mile fireball radius. Radiation goes for 1.5 miles, moderate blast damage, 2 miles beyond that, and the thermal radiation with third-degree burns goes out to almost 3 miles. Now let's calculate the casualties. Very densely populated area, casualties over 350,000 fatalities, 1.2 million plus injuries, and the radioactive cloud, again, programmed southwest winds at 15 knots, looks like this. So as a result of that opening salvo, where one of our submarines launches a missile at Beijing, let's imagine China responds by launching an ICBM at San Diego, an area that both has a large population, but is also where a lot of our military forces are stationed, particularly our West Coast fleet and our marine aviation assets up at Miramar. So what would that look like? Here's where the piers are. Here's where Miramar is. Used to be a Naval Air Station, now a Marine Corps Air Station. We set to the Dongfeng 5, their current ICBM, 5 megatons, and we detonate it. So the radius goes out 34 kilometers into Mexico and north past Del Mar. The casualties are incredibly high, more than 500,000 fatalities and over 1 million injuries. The radiation causes an additional 400,000 plus fatalities and another almost 500,000 injuries. And that radiation cloud, using the standard program of a 15-knot southwesterly breeze, extends all the way to the Grand Canyon. So in terms of our awareness of will we know when these are launched and how much response time will we have and what can we do about it, it's a mixed bag. We'll certainly know when these weapons are launched for sure. With our ballistic point missile defense systems, if we're heads up, we can catch them on the way up. When they reach the high altitudes and during the terminal phase, it's unknown how good our defense systems are going to be. And of course, missile time of flight varies by the range the missile's traveling. The bottom line, our ability to shoot missiles out of the sky has been mixed so far, and even with the longest shot, we're not going to have a whole lot of time to react. So I've just highlighted 4 very general scenarios. North Korea attacks Tokyo. Russia attacks Washington, D.C. America attacks Beijing using a submarine. China attacks San Diego using an ICBM. Now, each one of those scenarios is just using one missile. So you can see using Nuke Map, we have upwards of 500,000 people killed with a single weapon with any one of these scenarios. If you're having a full-up nuclear exchange, certainly countries like China and Russia and the United States are not lobbing a single missile at a time. So the resultant casualties be orders of magnitude higher than the numbers I've gone over in this episode. And then everything in the path of that cloud is contaminated by radiation. So any wildlife that wanders off and is touched by anything else is now also contaminated. Drinking water is contaminated. Crops are contaminated. Any food sources are contaminated. So the devastation in the weeks and months to come is exponentially increased. The other thing that we need to consider here is what happens to the atmosphere. So just think about this past summer. I'm here on the East Coast, but our skies were smoky from the wildfires in the Pacific Northwest and around Nevada. So think about what would happen if nuclear radiation was blown by a mushroom cloud into the atmosphere and then got caught up in the jet stream. Here's some modeling that was done with respect to that phenomenon around the possible exchange of nuclear weapons between India and Pakistan. You can see here, on one day, the radiation is spread well beyond the borders of those two countries, and then some days later, it's across the entire world. The other thing here is because this radiation goes above the weather, it's not dissipated by rain or other natural phenomenon in a way that the wildfires were. Basically, we blot out the sun and we have a nuclear winter that will ultimately kill the planet. So the bottom line is nobody wins, we all lose in a nuclear war. We got to do our best not to forget that. All right, that'll do it for this episode. If you're a first-time viewer, please ring the bell and subscribe so you don't miss anything. Give me the likes and comment. If you'd like to help support the channel, please consider using the super thanks, the heart icon with the $sign below, or become a patron at patreon.com/WardCarroll. Check the links below for merch and links where to get my first 3 novels, the Punks trilogy, just reissued by the Naval Institute Press. Use the discount code PUNKYT for 25% off at usni.org. And in the meantime, I look forward to talking to you again soon.